Did you have any questions for us before we kind of get started?
No, I think it's just a great idea. It is such a special program, effort, initiative, accomplishment that I think what you're doing is fabulous. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, how should I refer to you in the interview, sir? Lou. Okay, wonderful. You call me Paul and Adolfo, of course. So I'll start off with just some basic questions and the same kind of format I've been using, and then Adolfo will pick up and he'll have questions too. We start by asking everyone about your own educational autobiography and kind of, the role that education has played in your life. And then we'll kind of transition forward to the Opportunity Scholars Program, if that sounds good.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, well, right. Yeah, real quickly, my educational background, I have a Bachelor of Arts in American History, a minor in philosophy from the University of Portland, Oregon. I grew up in Seattle is my hometown. And so I went to college in the Northwest. I then got my MBA from the University of Utah. While I spent 11 years in the Air Force, coming out of college in ROTC and spending 11 years. And while in the Air Force, I received my MBA from the University of Utah. And I've also done the executive graduate program at University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and a couple of summer programs. That's my academic background.
All right, wonderful. Lou, growing up, can you talk about kind of your, even the K through 12 experiences, what education meant to you, like as a value, like maybe with your parents instilling that, what role did education play in your time growing up?
Well, that's the foundation question for us, for my wife and I, on why we've done and what we're doing in the Machen Opportunity Scholars. Both my wife and I are first gens. For many of the years, for the early years up to about the age 12, I had a single mom with 4 children. Went to parochial school all the way through grade school and into a Jesuit high school. But education was always extremely important to us. And neither my mother, my father, or my stepfather were college grads. So being a first gen was part of who we are, without ever identifying that we were first gens, but things that you had to overcome, things that you had to worry about, and how to go to college. Thank goodness I went to a Jesuit high school that was always about college. The university was always the goal. Without that, I don't know. I suspect we would have been okay, but who knows? My wife also is a first gen. Her father came from Sicily when he was 5 years old. And put himself through a bachelor's degree, master's degree, and a PhD at night throughout his career while building a career with Bell Labs. So first generation is part of our makeup of who we are. And it's interesting that in all of our charitable work, all of our giving back, paying forward, if you will, about 90% of it is around educational opportunity. Because we truly believe that education is the door, if you can open it, really leads to a very productive life and a better society. So the Florida Opportunity Scholars, which is what it was originally, before it was named for Bernie Machen, really struck us. It resonated with us from the very beginning that we heard about it, that we started hearing about it.
How did you first hear about it?
I was a new member of the University of Florida Foundation. I was thinking about this about 7 years ago or so. I think I was a rookie member of the foundation. And I'd come onto the foundation as a result of my relationship at the medical school with the then dean of the medical school, Dr. Mike Good. And we would have our annual meetings, and we would have 2 meetings a year. And Bernie, then President Machen, would stand up and he would give a state of the college, state of the university talk to the foundation, which is the fundraising element, is a component of our Florida community. And he always was very proud of and spoke of this Opportunity Scholars. And then we typically would have one of the scholars, one of the Opportunity Scholars, speak to us at a lunch. And of course, it was a four or five Kleenex lunch all the time, because they would tell their story. And so everybody would go out feeling good. But one of the things that Bernie always talked about, he says, there's never enough. I don't have enough. There's too much need. We don't have enough funding, et cetera. And that just kept resonating with me. And I, quite frankly, I looked around the room. There were 300 people, maybe 200 people in the room or something, all donors, all foundation members. So they were very active in raising funds and giving back to the university. And I just couldn't understand it. So I spent a number of, I would always approach Bernie, who didn't know who I was at the time. What do you need? What's going on? I'd go to the foundation leadership. Why aren't we doing more? And I couldn't get really definitive answers, quite frankly. And so it became a mission for me that we needed to do something more, and I needed to get involved in that as in my role on the foundation. And that's how I heard about it, really, from Bernie talking about it, but always saying we didn't have enough, we needed to do more, et cetera. And I couldn't understand that. I just could not understand why we couldn't figure out a way to do more for these incredible young people and give them their opportunities.
Well, Lou, with your amazing foundation experience, and thank you, by the way, because I know how hard you work, and we're very grateful in the oral history program for the work of the foundation, certainly. How do you make that pitch? And so you become a believer because of your experiences, and I want to get into some of your other experiences a bit later, but let's kind of jump forward here. So you find out about this remarkable program, you approach the president of the university, you say, okay, what can we do? So then how do you turn around and make a pitch to someone who doesn't know, who doesn't appreciate, who doesn't understand the uniqueness and the importance of this program? How do you outreach to them?
Well, I start to talk about this incredible program we have at the university and how proud we are of the university. And it might be a conversation with a Gator alum or just any friend of mine. And you talk about this great scholarship program, because if you talk about scholarship work, and most of our friends and acquaintances know that Rosemary and I are involved in scholarships of all kinds. And so you get to talking about scholarships, then you say, okay, there's this opportunity program at the University of Florida. And then I begin to tell them the story. Is that this started with, this is first gen. What was extraordinary to me over the last number of years, I sit on a number of other educational foundations and what have you. Specifically one, I'm a board of trustee member of Phi Theta Kappa, which is the honor society for community colleges. When you talk to people and you talk about, you say first gen, you see the light go on in there, 3 out of 5, maybe 6 out of 10. The light goes on. And what I've begun to recognize is that there is an enormous number of first gen successful people. And they don't identify as first gens. They don't think about being first gen. But when you bring up first gen as this program, it grabs their interest. And that's when you get the opening. Then you say, well, look, it started out, we have a great president. He started this program. He wanted to give opportunity. They're Florida high school grads. It was helped with Governor Bush at one point in time. You get past that and you give them the real closer. We started out with gross family income. We thought Bernie Matchett at $40,000. Our current average gross family income for our MFOS students now is somewhere around $19,000 a year. Gross income. And their eyes go like this. How is that possible? And then you hit them with that. And then what we do is we give them a scholarship that tops them off and finishes them off. And they can graduate from the University of Florida, number 6 in the country, debt-free. And they just, basically, it's like the Jerry Maguire. You get them at hello. You really have them at hello. And then you start talking about what you could do, et cetera. And then you got to work the fundraising and do that kind of thing. But even that message, let me divert a little bit. That's a message that we've spent 5 or 6 years even getting it out to our own foundation members and the university community. Because the thing that what I recognized early, I learned early on with Dave Kratzer, General Kratzer, was that our students, every one of our colleges at the university, they have advocates. It's the alumni. You relate to the Department of History or the College of Liberal Arts or engineers. I'm in the med school. I'm on the advisory board of the med school. They always relate to their alumni of the med school. So when it comes to giving, they have advocacy, they have relationships, they have an affiliation for that college. And that's usually how our fundraising goes. It goes by virtue of the colleges. Well, our students, our opportunity scholars, they don't have any advocates. There isn't they're spread throughout the entire community. They're not identified as much back then as a cohort. And so consequently, they needed advocacy. They needed somebody to be their advocate. And for many, many years, Bernie Machen was their advocate. But we needed to expand that. And that was at the beginning of when we really started to work on this program, to expand the program and just raise awareness. So the story I tell you about this 40,000 down to 19,000, first gen, light goes on. That applies to people that applied to the people on the foundation as well, let alone friends of mine and people, gators that I run into in Sarasota, Florida, or around the country. So it's a story that needs to be told. When you tell it, you grab attention. That's basically how I go about it.
Excellent. So wonderful, wonderful analytical description of the whole process of promoting this wonderful program. Lou, I wonder if we could take a step back and think about your experience as a first generation college student and thinking about your work now with MFOS. What are some of the challenges that first gen college students face? What were some of the challenges you faced, first of all, and then what makes that experience distinctive in terms of, maybe needing a little more, or maybe bringing more to the university?
Well, you start with the idea that you're first gen. By first gen, obviously, it's intuitive. Your parents have not gone to college. So your parents, or single parent, and many of our FOS students are single parent, are products of single parent households. I was, for much of my upbringing, I was blessed. We were blessed. My stepfather was wonderful, et cetera, later on into high school, et cetera. But for much of that time, I had a single mom, single parent household. You have no idea what college is all about. You're not really sure what even a career might be. And when you get there, your orientation, you're disoriented. I reflect back on that now. It's been way too many years since I was a freshman walking into college. But as I think about it, as I reflect and I watch our students, our FOS students, it's a lack of orientation. You sit in, you get to set your courses, you take your courses, and that's usually, but what do I do with these courses? What is this going to lead to? Where am I going in this process? How do I even order? Because of now with my children, let's put it out, both of our children are college graduates. I was able to really relate to them. I was able to talk about, well, you're going to go here, you got to get your courses, you got these hours, you got to do this, this is a potential career, et cetera. Friends of ours are all college graduates, if you will, so that they have role models. Not only do you get orientation going in before you start, but you have role models to follow and experiences to follow. For instance, if you're a Gator graduate and your children go to the University of Florida, they've already been steeped in what it means to go to college, but what it means to go to the University of Florida with all that represents. Our students don't have that. They don't start with that. This morning, I'm on obviously on the MFOS advisory board. We just had our meeting this morning. We had 3 students come to talk to us. We always do it. And all 3 of them had the exact same story. The point in their story is that they didn't know how to even apply for college. They didn't know that they could go. One student said, well, why do I have to apply? Don't I just go like I went to high school? I just show up. So there's no and they were all single parent households with no experience at all, orientation. So that leads, that's part of the whole MFOS program as well, is to make up for that lack of role models, orientation, and what have you. So that's what, and I reflected on that I actually went through that myself, that I realized now, I look back, some of the disorientation, et cetera, what am I going to do, et cetera. I started out in the School of Business at Portland, and about three semesters in it, I realized I don't want to, at the time, I didn't want to do business. And a friend of mine said, well, what do you really like? I said, I love history. I love American history. I love political science. And I'm spending all my time in those days, you guys are all much more modern now. I spent my whole time looking at the curriculum where all of my electives could be. And I was taking all these history courses and all these philosophy courses. And he says, well, hell, why don't you switch majors and go into history? Well, if I hadn't had the backing of my parents at that time to be able to do that, if I'm a first gen without any orientation or role models, and I don't have anybody to go to talk to about that, I don't know what I would have done. That's a lot of years ago. Our students now, they have Leslie, they have the whole staff, they have people that fill that role for them, that fill in for those holes in their background, or so that they have orientation. They're able to deal with it. They can ask those questions, and they can progress that way. Mm-hmm. That's the best answer I could give for that.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, Lou, your experiences resonate with me, and I think Adolfo as well. I mean, we're both also first generation.
Light bulb just went on, right? Light bulb.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting in some of the interviews we've done up to this point. One of the things that, and I remember Bernie Machen talking about this, and he was saying, something that you just said really resonated, where Bernie says something to the effect that a lot of people on university campuses see first-gen students kind of coming down the road, and they think, oh, deficits, this is what they didn't have, this is what we're going to have to provide for them. But one of the things we've been hearing is how much resilience and how much those first-gen students bring with them to the university. Can you talk about that aspect? What are the strong points? How do first-gen college students enrich our university campus?
It's a great point. I think resilience is one way to describe it. There were a couple of years where Leslie asked me to talk to the ambassadors orientation, and my first comment to any of our FOS students is that as you go to meet donors and you go to meet people and you're ambassadors of the program, your story is extraordinary. I mean, that's a story that resonates with anybody that you tell it to. That's a given, and you ought to tell it. It's important, but you need to also understand or appreciate that you're already successful. You're 18, 19, 20 years old. You're in a single parent house, first gen. Income disparity and what have you, and you're here. And the reason you're here is not just the resilience, but the fact is that you have overcome enormous barriers and hardships to get here, and you've been successful. So as of right now, you've been 18, 19 years old, 20 years old. You're already a success. You've got more behind you in terms of experience of overcoming than your peers, your fellow students. They come from whatever you will, a two-parent home, college graduate parents, and all of that, that standard. You're already ahead of the game. So that I think that's the strongest characteristic. The fact that you could even get here, you've overcome enormous obstacles on your own. People have helped you. Perhaps they have, perhaps they haven't. Somehow you got here. Somehow you were decided that you were going to take charge of your own life, et cetera. So by the time you've been selected, you're already a success, and you need to understand that. And that's how we fit in, how they fit into the university and the community, and the contribution they can make, because they're already leaders, in my opinion.
Yeah, excellent. Lou, you mentioned before that one of the ways that you really promote MFOS is to really put the students in the spotlight and to really create a space for them to tell their stories. What have been some of the most gripping, profound stories that you've heard from the students that kind of stick with you?
Oh golly, I can't count the number of our students that talk about, again, single parent, working 2 to 3 jobs, sleeping in their car, homeless, drug addiction, drugs in the neighborhood, in the family, overcoming that, having to run away from home and survive, while still becoming a student officer in the high school, as well as getting your 3.8 or 4.0 grade point, etc. It's when you hear and those stories. Those are perhaps the extreme, but they're not that rare in our experience. You get dramatic, living in a car, that may be dramatic, etc. But we've heard those stories enough times. I've heard those stories enough times to really feel like it isn't extraordinary. It's too often. And it really is I think it's the description of what living in poverty means, the impact of living in poverty, and what you have to do to survive living in poverty, and that's what the Machen, that's what the Opportunity Scholar Program represents to me. It's the face of it's overcoming the enormous obstacles you have automatically, institutionally, and to be able to overcome that. So I could tell, the stories tend to sound alike but they're not repetitive. They're really common. And what it basically has taught me over the last 5 or 6 years is, and with all of our other scholarship programs as well as other institutions, et cetera, those are the kinds of stories, those are the kinds of obstacles that these young people have to overcome.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, I didn't know if I gave you.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and and that's been really one of the highlights of MFOS.
Yeah.
And it's something I know that Leslie and others have really stressed is, the power of the student stories. It's important, I think, to provide them with the space to tell their own stories, right? So they know, hey, I matter, my story matters, and at the same time, I think you're telling us it's important to tell maybe a more traditional 3rd, 4th, 5th generation student, college. I mean, I remember when I was, my first history grad seminar at Duke, we went around the table and we introduced ourselves, talked about where we're from. The person next to me said, well, my great grandfather was a professor at Princeton before the Civil War. And I was like, oh my gosh. And the next one, his father was the chair of one of the largest, law firms in New York. And I'm like, wow, my people were like peasant farmers in Mexico in the 1840s. So it's just by you providing that space for the students is so critically important. One more question along with that. Again, I know Adolfo has some questions as well. But in terms of telling the stories, are there any stories that you have seen? And now I'm kind of asking you to maybe switch gears a little bit and think about your role as a foundation and a development person. Are there any stories that really that you've seen just kind of resonate and get a potential donor going and kind of get the wheels spinning? Or are they all just kind of?
It really is. It doesn't. It's not that it merges all together, and I don't mean to say that they're all the same stories and you get. But it's back to my Jerry Maguire analogy. When you finally open up the fact, first gen, single parent, many times, not all of our FOS are single parents, but that tends to be the dominant family makeup. And then you lay on that gross family income, which stuns people. I mean, the people I'm talking to, the foundation people, et cetera, they're all successful. and they've overcome, and wherever they've been in their life, and they've gotten to this stage where they're in the foundation, they're contributors, and so they are successful by definition of being in the foundation. They've had a successful career, a successful life. Most of them are out of touch, if you will, and I don't mean to get missionary on you, but they're out of touch with the face of what poverty means in this country. I guess maybe I knew it, but I felt it because of the scholarship work we do. But so when you do that first gen, the light bulb goes on. That's when you really got it. That's the Jerry Maguire moment. And then when you drop them down to give them that gross family income, and they're stunned. And they've been sending their kids to college and doing that kind of thing, and you just see it. How would we have ever? How's anybody survive on $19,000 a year? I have to believe that is what resonates, but we've had to tell the story. We've been telling the story for 4 or 5 years. Bernie had been telling it for 4 or 5 years. It wasn't getting any more money. I don't know if Bernie would. I think Bernie would agree with me on that, because when he and I and Dave Kratzer got together, and Tom Mitchell at the foundation got together finally to run this campaign 5-6 years ago. He'd been saying it all along, and then walking out of the foundation. I tell you, he'd walk out of the foundation lunch, and he wouldn't walk out with any money. He'd say, "I don't have enough money. I need more money. I could do more good." And he'd finish his meeting, everybody would clap, and he'd go back to do his thing, and everybody go back to doing their thing, and they'd go over to the football game. And that just bugged the hell out of me. So I think that until we started telling the story even to ourselves inside the foundation, that it began to resonate. And it's taken 3 or 4 or 5 years to get that story out. It's now a critical resource. It's a critical objective of the foundation, the university, the provost, the president, and what have you. So now we've gotten to our own community. Now, and as we've done that, we've begun to reach outside of the foundation community into other people in the Gator Nation, if you will, and start to talking about that kind of thing. So that's my sense of where that's at.
Excellent. Adolfo, you have?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you for giving us a great response. Yeah, I'm responding. I'm actually writing a little bit of the autobiography almost over here of what you're providing us right now. And I'm like, wow, that is really good information you're providing us. I'm just already thinking how I'm going to use this information to bring it out in the open. You know, it's very important. But going to my question, I wanted to talk a little bit more the chronology, if you have any dates and maybe important things that happened within the MFOS program while you've been there, or if you know, either impacts, it could be positive or negative. We've been trying to like get some of that chronology down. So if you could provide us maybe big steps within the MFOS where things have shifted, either down.
The time that President Machen got there and started it, that's clearly, and you can get that from Bernie, you know, when he got there and he started it. And then you fast forward, and I've been telling you about the last 4 years of his tenure is when I started I was on the foundation, and these luncheon talks would happen. So in that time frame, it was still at 300. He had grown it to 1,100 students. He was funding it primarily out of in the beginning, when he first started it, he went to Jeb Bush. I'll tell you a little story about Jeb Bush. I was at a back 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe even 5.5, when Governor Bush or Jeb, and I've known him for some time, not really well, but I know him, was thinking about running for president. And I was in some meetings about that kind of thing. Big meetings. I'm not that important. And I wanted to make sure that when I met Jeb, when I got a chance to tell him, I said, you know, I want to bring you greetings from Bernie Machen. And he goes, "Oh, Bernie, what's he up to?" And I said, "Well, you know, he's now moved on and we've got a new president, but I really want to tell you about this Machen, this opportunity scholars." He says, "Yeah." He says, "I remember when Bernie came to me and promoted this, that we needed to do more for first gen students in Florida and what have you. And he convinced me that we had to put money in the governor's budget." And he starts telling the program. And then I started telling him where we were. And it was like, you know, it was like a proud papa who had lost track of this many accomplishments, but this was one accomplishment. And I told him where we were and where we were going. And that's a timeline in there that you can get from Bernie when he went there at the beginning and went to Governor Bush. That's important. Match the funding. We matched the funding, and then the money went away from the state, and that's when Bernie had to start financing it, funding it out of his own budget, which is what he would tell us at these luncheons. So you fast forward to about a year before. It was the last year of Bernie's tenure. If you recall, you may or may not call it, is that he was going to retire on a certain year, and I don't remember the year. You could get those dates. And then he was extended by Governor Scott for another year. It was during that year that I think it all sort of came together. Maybe I was a fairly new member of the foundation. All that thing I was telling you about earlier was all happening in that period of time. And I started I started talking to Tom Mitchell. We got to do something. We got to have a campaign. Bernie's retiring, and I said, I'll kick it off with a matching donation, but I'd like us to have a real campaign to raise more money for the Opportunity Scholars program. And it was in that year that Bernie went from being going to retire, and then he extended a year until President Fox got here. That year, and I don't remember that year. You guys can get those dates. But that period of time is when we started putting this program together, the fundraising program. And how that came about is that I started it with a gift, a matching gift, modest. But Tom, then we met with Tom, and Tom then had his number two in the development. Said, okay, we'll do this campaign and we'll see if we can raise. I think our goal was $3 million. That was right in front of when Bernie, probably the last half of that year that we started putting it together. And what we said is, okay, that was a critical time when the foundation stepped up and said, we'll do a campaign to raise money, a fundraising campaign for Opportunity Scholars. We had no board, we had no advisory group. None of that was in existence. So it was in that last 6 months of Bernie's tenure that we started talking about, got the campaign off with about 3 months left in his tenure. Tom, if you've interviewed Tom Mitchell, Tom has this seminal event when we had I think within a couple of weeks that we had this meeting, we were going to kick it off. He goes, and I'll give you another date. I don't have the date, you can find. We go to Texas A&M to play Texas A&M, okay? Bernie goes as the president goes, and Tom goes, et cetera. Tom tells a story that he was a donor, a very wealthy donor, comes up to him and says, we got to do something for Bernie in his retirement. We had a campaign already kicked off, silent campaign, that we were going to do, that we were going to rotate it around. We were going to use Bernie's retirement as our catalyst to raise money. Okay. This donor walks up and says, what can I do? And he says, hey, you got this program. We just started it. And Tom does his thing. Within a month of that encounter, I think it's within a month, we had a $10 million anonymous gift. The donor said, what would it take to name the program after the endowment, name it after Bernie and Chris Machen? They went back and they did the numbers, et cetera, and the foundation guys know how to do that. The fundraisers know how to do that. They come back and he says, $10 million. He said, fine, it's an anonymous gift. Writes a check for $10 million. We were off and running. We had to set a goal of $3 million. And in one event, because we had the campaign already in place, we had it named. That's when it became the MFOS program. It was endowed with an anonymous gift of $10 million. We go on then to raise a lot more money. So that was a critical milestone. Another critical milestone is that Bernie now is, I don't think President Fox had even been selected yet, but we knew that Bernie was leaving. One of the things that was very important to me, and I went to Dave Kratzer with this, and I said, here's the problem. I don't know, you guys can edit this out, but I'll just give you some background. You talk about milestones. This is all happening now. Within a couple of months of Bernie leaving, I think maybe President Fox had been already named, and he wasn't going to be there for a while, or what have you. And I went to Dave Kratzer and I said, we got a problem. He said, what's that? I said, when Bernie leaves and a new president comes in, we don't know what that president's priorities are going to be. It could be anything. He has his causes and his, what he wants to do. And what I'm concerned is we've now got this momentum going. I don't want to lose the emphasis for that. And I want to go talk to President Machen. And so Dave and I went, and General and I went and talked to Bernie. And I told him that. I said, the next person who walks into this office, sits in the desk, Bernie, may have a whole other set of priorities. So that's when he said, okay, what do you want? He says to General Kratzer, you need more staff? He said, yes, I always need more staff. He says, fine, put it in the budget. He says, I got my last budget that I'm going to approve as president. Put it in the budget, make sure you get it in there, and we'll get it in so you get more staff. And on the other side, I said, we need a steering committee. We need some sort of an oversight group, the semi-official with the right people on it, et cetera. I'll serve on it, but get the right people that'll keep the attention of the president, the new president. That's when the leadership council was actually formed, based on that. And Jolene Merkel was the first chairman, who was the perfect person to head it off. She'd been a former trustee. She was a major giver to the university. She was incredible energy level. She's been my mentor on the foundation, one of my mentors on the foundation. So she chaired it. Then we had an advisory board. Those are the kinds of things that happened all within the last year of Bernie's tenure. And then we get blessed. President Fox walks in and says, minority students, diversity, what have you, first gens, et cetera, is a priority of mine. We were home free. And we always had the support of Joe Glover, the provost. But now we had a president that actually made it one of his top 5 priorities. So that sequence was really the time. And it all happened within about 6 months. That set this thing in motion and set it in some concrete, so we had a program so we could and build on that program. And that was really the formulation, I think, of the MFOS effort that we have on the campus today.
Thank you. That's very detailed. I love it, because this is great material. Thank you.
Well, you can go get those dates. I'm bad on those.
Get the dates, but the stories are just.
I gave you the milestones. You can go the event. You can go find out when that event was.
So, being as a board member, is this something that you guys work all the time on, or in the advisory board meetings, or what happens during the advisory board meetings?
The foundation committees, there are a couple of any fundraising or foundation committees. There are some committees that meet more often and probably do more work, and they're the business oriented. They're the finance, the governance, audit, those kinds of things that happen in any business, but also happen in the foundation. And they probably meet more on a more continuous basis and do more of the work. On our board, what we do is, to the extent that each member has an interest or has some time on their hands or wants to work on it, they basically then work through Ashley, who's the fundraiser, the development officer, and MFOS, and Lindsay. So it comes and goes. I think that as I said, I've taught at a couple of the ambassador leadership orientation. I know some other members have talked that we've sat through committees and where we've met with students and what have you. But on a day-to-day, it's not a day-to-day job for us. It's really up to them, and then we support them as we will at various campaigns or various events. So it's not heavy lifting, if you will, from a business standpoint or from a personal time standpoint. But I think this committee really, it's with us all the time. It's something we're going to talk about. It's something that I talk about whenever I'm talking about the University of Florida, whether it's to a Gator alum or to my friends that go to Duke or some other places or North Carolina. These are the kinds of things that's always in our head. So we're always talking about it. One of the greatest, we have some ambassadors, some donors on the committee that do far more work in terms of selling the story. Jolene is one of the prime examples. Moniz, who is our current chairman of the board, of the advisory board, does a lot of work like that. So I do what I can when I can, and it varies.
Lou, we've taken up a lot of your time. I know you're very
subject, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, a couple things just kind of popped into mind when you were talking, and about just this incredible staff at the core of MFOS. Could you talk a little bit about Leslie Pendleton, about kind of the quality of her leadership and why she's been such an integral kind of driver, of the program?
She's Earth Mother, with all of that represents. She is the mother of she literally is the parent of the program. It's her phenomenal dedication and energy level and caring. Because as we talked earlier, as you come in as a first gen, you're disoriented. You really have no orientation as to what to do. So this is a place for you to come. When you come there, you come to her. This whole time that I've been talking about, the last 4 or 5 years, she was busy raising a family and growing her family, as well as getting a PhD. So I mean, she's all in. Yeah. And it's more than just being, no offense, just being a faculty member or a mentor or whatever. I think it's even more than being a chair. It's more effort than even being a department chair. And I see department chairs all over the university. This is, to me, I think that this is 24/7 for her. And then as she brings on FOS alum to help her and they become full-time staff, or she even recruits them, the people she's recruited over the last 5 or 6 years have been extraordinary. Every single one of them is a rock star, and an energy level and a caring for the program. They have the heart of the program, and that's her. That's leadership. She's been helped. I think General Kratzer was a tremendous supporter. I believe the successor to General Kratzer, and now DeAndre Moll, who is the new VP of Student. All of them have been tremendous supporters of her and have had her back. Joe Glover, the provost, had her back, but she did the job. She is responsible for the success of this program.
Excellent. Lou, thinking, maybe, we always have to think about the sustainability of, any university-based program. You've talked earlier about the talent, the amazing kind of career trajectories of our of the alumni from MFOS. Where do you want to see MFOS, 5-10 years down the road? Like what are some of the next stages of its growth and development for you?
Obviously one of the critical items that is the fuels the engine that keeps it going is funds. Still to this day, Provost Glover and President Fox still bear the responsibility for funding most of the program. I mean, up until recently, we had 1,100 students on campus, all on full scholarship. That's now gone because that's gone up because Provost Glover and President Fox and the Board of Trustees and the foundation said, we're going to take it up to 400. We're going to do it in increments. I think we're a year ahead of our increment. Leslie told us this morning at our advisory board, we went to 350. We're now going to go to 400. I think a year early. So the funds are always going to be, there's always going to be pressure on that element. So from the fundraising standpoint and the foundation, we're trying to raise up as much as $100 million endowment. That's a significant endowment to keep this thing going. That's sustainability. Along the way, the foundation and the executive board of the foundation, which is the fiduciary, runs the foundation, made up of members of the foundation, about 25 of us. We, this past year, decided that MFOS was one of our 2 funding priorities, I think, for the next 5 years. So we've adopted MFOS. So we're looking for 100% participation from the executive board contributing each year. We then expanded that out to the foundation, which comes out to about 200 members. That was then extended to the Alumni Association, which has another couple of hundred members. So that begins a sustainability to fund it. Because what Provost Glover challenged us is, I'll take it up to 400, but you've got to help me. You've got to raise some money to start taking it from an endowment standpoint, annual giving, annual disbursement, et cetera, to keep this program funded. That's the financial. Without the financial, the program, I think, would really struggle. Go back to the original days of Bernie Machen. It was struggling then to get funded. We don't want to get back to there. That's one. 2, where do you see it going? We're up to, I don't know, you would probably have the number better than I think we're up to 5. Are we up to 5,000 graduates. Is that the number that we work with? That 5,000 graduates are just early in their career. They're the first 10 years of their career. And you're going to go through that at some point in time. But so they're beginning to, and every one of them comes out of MFOS. This is another characteristic of our scholars. They all understand the opportunity and the blessing they were given. So to a person, they all believe in paying it forward. They understand that they've got to reach back and want to reach back and help the current, and maybe even reach down into their community and help them at an earlier age. That's important. We're beginning to build that base, the 5,000 alums. We're graduating 300 or 400 a year. So that's growing. We just, I happen to chair the nominating committee of the foundation, and we just brought on the first FOS member to the foundation because he was the first FOS alum, recent alum, to actually give a gift back to the university, Brandon White. That's starting. That will continue. And they've just announced today, they've just announced a Machen alumni board that they're starting to self-organize. So we have enough we're beginning to build that critical mass. That's important because that's 20 years from now, that FOS alum, been successful, they're all going to be successful in their lives. They're going to keep this program in their heart and support it going. So you build it that way. As long as the university, I think from a sustainability standpoint, so I think you want to see more, obviously. We're up to 400. I think we're a gold standard program in the country. I absolutely do. Forget the Ivy Leagues. They give away all these scholarships. Of public universities, we're top 5. We want to be top 5. I guarantee you we are top 5 in this kind of program. And I challenged the enroll even this morning. Where are we? How are you getting that word out? Where are we going? Leslie is co-writing the standards. So that kind of national attention, I think, is critical because as we achieve national national awareness, national awards, if you will, that then feeds back into the university saying this is a critical program. I think we are in an era in our country and our society where diversity is critical, where opportunity is critical, where education is mandatory. So I think that kind of, we're on the right side of history on this one. So of course, I'd like to have another 400. I'd like to have 1,000, but we've got to sustain it. We've got to build a fund, and we've got to convince the university that as donors, we're prepared to support that so that they will support it. That's where I see the next 5 years. I don't get much beyond 5 years. I mean, I'm a history major, but that means I look backwards. I don't look forward.
Thank you. Yeah, whenever someone asks, a reporter asks me, who do you think is going to win the next election, whatever level, I'm like, I'd rather not even, I've never guessed it correct. I've never called it right, including
well,
this last one.
You and all the experts. Nobody's going to be right.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we have, Lou, I wanted to also share with you that, this is all what you just mentioned really is part of, Leslie's and Bernie's vision for the documentary project is really to use that. And we'll have a series of podcasts too that the students are going to produce because we want to hear really from a student perspective because the students this semester and Adolfo is the leader of our team teaching group with our interns who are interviewing. We want to hear from the student perspective, what they see as important from the program, kind of looking on the outside and interviewing their peers who are first-gen students, and so that's a valuable insight as well. But I do think that part of the goal of this whole project is really to just continue getting the word out there about MFOS. Mm-hmm. And we'll make it a part of our regular podcast series, UFL history too, and just continue doing that. Are there anything else you wanted to share, with us, this afternoon? I know we're running up on closing, quitting time. So I don't want to keep you too much longer, but any other thoughts or ideas or that you want to share?
I've probably given you more B-roll than you could use.
No.
No, I think you've got the essence of where my feelings about it, how I feel about this program and these young people. I really do. And our mission, it's our mission. It really is. And everybody on this advisory board, everybody involved in the Machen opportunity, really take it on as their mission to make this a success and keep it a success.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Mr. Oberndorf, thank you so much. Thank you for your service, sir. And we are just really grateful that you took time out of your very busy schedule to spend with us today. If you have any questions, you know how to get in touch with us. Next stages include Deborah will kind of produce the recording. We get DVD copies of that to you. It'll take us a little while to do the transcript. We'll be transcribing each of the interviews.
Yeah.
And all of that, again, will become part of the permanent record at Smathers Libraries. And so make sure that we have that, kind of historical, foundation so people can know where this program came from, where it is now, and where we want to take it the next steps.
Excellent. Well, again, if there's anything you want to do, any clarification, anything you want to get back, anything you want to do on this program, please feel free to reach out. I'll make time.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now stay safe and we'll talk soon.
I got my 2 shots. I'm okay.
I actually just got my first today with my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adolfo, you don't need it, do you?
I mean, I do talk to
Okay, Paul. Adolfo, thank you very much. And thanks for doing this. Thanks for listening.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.